1 in a series of orchid care videos sponsored and presented by repotme.com Orchid Supplies.
We're here to talk today about general care of Phalaenopsis orchids. The name might be hard to pronounce. It's pronounced Phalaenopsis, but there's no need to fail when you're trying to take care of this plant because it's actually quite a good and easy to grow houseplant. We're often asked about when will my orchid bloom next. With Phalaenopsis orchids, it's very common for them to set their next bloom spike in the fall and to grow new leaves during the summer. During the spring is typically their blooming season. As we have here is an older Phalaenopsis that we've had for a few years. This particular plant happens to be called Phalaenopsis, which is a species plant. What I'm interested in showing you here first is how the bloom spikes come out of this particular plant. What we'll see here are two bloom spikes that are coming out of this orchid. And how we know these are bloom spikes is because the stem that is coming out, not only is it coming straight up, but also it has a characteristic mitten shape to the very tip of the stem. This shape is characteristically different than that of the type of tip that we see on the average new root. For example, down here we have a new root that has just come out, and we can see that it's pointed. It has a white outer covering and then a green, healthy, growing root. I've moved some of the orchid media back here from this plant so that we can take a look at exactly where the bloom spikes come out. Typically in Phalaenopsis, the bloom spikes will emerge from in between the leaves. Typically there needs to be at least 2 mature leaves before a bloom spike would emerge. For example, in this other orchid that I have here, we can see that this bloom spike is coming from about the very top of where a bloom spike could come from. In other words, we have 2 mature leaves and then the bloom spike coming from the base right here. Because it's summer, this plant is also growing a brand new leaf. So back to our Phalaenopsis here, we can see here that the bloom spikes come from alternating sides of the plant. This is an old bloom spike that we've cut off at the base. On the opposite side is another old bloom spike that we had cut off at the base. On the opposite side is another bloom spike that was cut off at the base. So the growth habit of this plant is essentially to grow leaves alternating from the central stem, one after another, after another, after another. To grow 1 to 2 leaves per year is pretty good for growing in a home environment. And we can see that this past summer, this plant has put on a brand new healthy leaf. And we have yet another little baby leaf coming right out here of the center. This leaf will likely grow a little bit more, and then I'm going to guess that it's going to stall in its growth as the plant begins to focus on the development of these bloom spikes. As these bloom spikes get taller, what we're going to want to do is to support them with stakes. If we look over here at this beautiful orchid, which is a Phalaenopsis Golden Treasure kaleidoscope orchid, we're supporting the bloom spike as it has grown with a series of flower clips and bamboo stakes. And again, once this Phalaenopsis gets a little bit bigger, we're going to want to do that too. Let's just take a look for a minute down here into the root zone of this orchid. And again, when we pot this, what we really want to do is we want to have the mix up to roughly where we're seeing fresh roots coming out of the green base. We don't want to bury the green base, but we do want to try to bury the vast majority of the roots. Some Phalaenopsis will stubbornly throw out aerial roots, and they're perfectly fine. There's no harm in those. This particular plant's nature is to bring the roots down into the mix. This plant has been in this mix for probably about a year, year and a half. This is one of my favorite mixes. It's called Phalaenopsis Monterey. It's made by Repotme.com Orchid Supplies. It consists of a really high quality, long fiber New Zealand sphagnum moss. These little pieces of bark in here that are also from New Zealand. It's called New Zealand Monterey pine bark. Little bits of cork and little bits of sponge rock. And this particular combination of ingredients is a good combination in that it prevents the orchid from getting too compacted. We don't want the moss to get really pushed down in there and get really soggy and sodden. But the other concern is we do want the Phalaenopsis to be fairly well secured in the pot, and in fact we can see that it is. This plant is very happy in its pot. It's been in its pot for a while. It has an extremely good root system. We can see that the roots are even coming out of the bottom of the pot. But I'm not going to repot it yet because I'm going to allow for these inflorescences to grow up and mature, and then once the plant is finished blooming, I'll consider repotting it. Now, as this plant gets taller and the bloom spikes begin to elongate, one of our concerns is whether or not it's going to get a little topply. The other concern is that we want this to be decorative. I want to go ahead and bring it in to our home. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it here into a ceramic orchid pot to bring it inside and enjoy the bloom.
For more information on orchid care and to purchase orchid supplies, please visit us at www.repotme.com. Thank you.